Welcome back. All right, so Panic Index time. Now, I know it's a Monday. I normally do these on Wednesday, but as we fly out tomorrow morning, I want to do this today, and I want to do it on the set and post it today. So at the top, we've got Dwight Schrute here saying, "Do you have tickets to the gun show?" Because, I mean, hey, what could be happier than Dwight and his guns? Down here, we've got, of course, the Panic Face, which started the whole Panic Index thing in the first place. And over here, you have the Dude. The Dude, of course, chilling. This being a sticker I got from Geeky Jerseys when I got my Lebowski jersey from Geeky Jerseys, which I may or may not take to Disneyland. I haven't decided yet. So, in this region will be teams that, yeah, they're out of it, but they're not overly worried. They're just looking at Bedard Watch. Maybe they get Fantilli, maybe they get Michkov, maybe they get one of the other really good prospects in this draft. Leo Carlson being another one. There's some really good draft picks in this upcoming draft, so there will be some teams residing here. So, let's go ahead and start, and this is in a random order. Washington. Now, for Washington, their recent play, I think, has them below the mark here. I don't think it's a full-blown panic yet because they're still above the playoff line. But Washington and Pittsburgh both have to be aware of Buffalo. Buffalo is coming along. If Buffalo can maintain this after the All-Star break, who knows? Buffalo could end up being a playoff team, and we could all be very surprised by that. The Buffalo and New Jersey could both be in the playoffs this year. So for Washington, I'm going to put them below the line, but not in panic. Pittsburgh's a tough one. So I just did the video on their All-Star break report, and it's kind of hard not to put them on the line. Now, last time out, I didn't put anybody on the line, which is kind of a cop-out a little bit. But, I think I'll put them in the same spot as Washington. Not really a reason for full-blown panic as of yet. They're going to get Jari back. They're going to likely go on another run because this is Pittsburgh. They're a very streaky team. But still, they're a little close to the playoff line for their liking right now. And so while I'm not going to have them in a full-blown panic, I think that that's a good spot for Pittsburgh. Now, Philly's a tough one because it kind of feels like they should be right about here. The reality is they're not that close to that number one draft pick right now because they keep winning games. So while their fans, I think, are ready for a top draft pick and ready for a number one or number two prospect to join the team, John Tortorella and the guys he puts out on the ice are not interested in that. They want to win games. They want to stay in contention. So I'm not going to put them over here because I don't know how happy Philadelphia fans, like I've seen some that are like, great, we're blowing our chance at a top draft pick. So I don't know. But I'm going to put them here, just over the Dude here, because again, they should be in that region once we get to the end of the season. Rangers, I'm going to put the Rangers right here, right underneath the picture. I don't think there's any reason for the Rangers to be concerned right now, or their fans, or media, or anything. And yet the concerns are always going to be there. So, yeah, for the New York Rangers, I think things are pretty good right now. You guys can let me know your thoughts, but I don't see any reason to have them in the panic area. The Islanders absolutely qualify for being just above the panic. So they end up winning a couple of games this past week. But for the Islanders, the odds of them making the playoffs, not fantastic right now. And so, we'll see what ends up happening with the Islanders after the All-Star break. For New Jersey, things are pretty happy in New Jersey. I see the comments. Devils fans are pretty happy, pretty confident in their team. And they should be. This is a really good, exciting young team. Jack Hughes has emerged as a superstar. And it has been quite the run to watch. They did have their downbeat in December, but they've bounced back from that really nicely as we're heading into February. Columbus at this point, I don't know about panic. I think they should be right down. I'll put them right there, right next to the Dude. I don't see any reason for there to necessarily be panic with Columbus. Gavrikov's probably leaving as a rental. I think they should be able to get a first for Gavrikov. I would point to Sherratt being worth a first last year, and I think Gavrikov should be worth what Sherratt was worth last year, if not more. I like Gavrikov. I do wonder how much Columbus gets back for him. And so, I'll have him right down here next to the Dude. I think things are cool now in Columbus. At least I think so. Carolina, no reason to be concerned about Carolina right now. I think Carolina's played really well over the last few weeks. They've had their downbeat too, much like New Jersey, and they're kind of cruising right now. We'll see coming out of the break whether or not that continues to be the case. They do have a game left before they get to said break, but they should be fine. Of course, I'll be watching those in California. But yeah, Carolina, I don't see any reason not to have them on the top row. Much the same with Toronto. Based on the game last night against Washington and based on their overall standing, I don't think there's a panic in Toronto. However, with Matthews being out, maybe they belong here, right? So I'll leave them there, but I kind of want to put them up there. It really, it depends, because that first game without Matthews, not great, but then last night they looked pretty darn good. They had a rough first period, but after that they recovered, and Toronto had a pretty good game. So yeah, I'll put Toronto there. Tampa Bay, I don't see any reason not to have Tampa Bay in the top row. Tampa Bay's 12-game home winning streak has been remarkable to watch. Yeah, on the road they could be somewhat mediocre, but if they keep winning like that at home, they could catch and pass Toronto. It's possible. I don't know that they do that, but it's possible that they could. So for Tampa Bay, and again, they've shown that if they're in third spot in their division, they're pretty dangerous from third spot in their division. So we'll see how things go for Tampa. But I like the odds of them coming out of that division range. Just be honest, and I'm saying that as a Boston fan. I still think until Tampa Bay loses a divisional round, it's their division to come out of. For Ottawa, for Ottawa, I kind of want to put them over in this area here, but they're still playing well enough that they're still in the hunt. Ottawa's a tough one to place on the board. But is there panic? I will say I will put them in the same spot as Washington and Pittsburgh. I don't know how much panic there is with Ottawa now, because we're so far into the season and it's been mediocre for long enough that I don't know how much actual panic there'd be with them. But I'm not going to put them above the line. They're not above the playoff line. They're not that close to the playoff line either. So they'll probably end up over here next month at some point, because I think Pierre Dorian's probably going to be selling at the deadline. Not selling a lot, and probably bringing other players in as well. I think it'll be one of those situations where he sells off certain guys but brings other guys in just to show his team, hey, I still believe in you. Winnipeg kind of did that last year at the deadline, and we've seen how Winnipeg's responded this season to changes. They've done quite well. Montreal, I think with Caulfield being out for the rest of the season, I don't see any reason not to have him right in this area now and at all. This season is basically done for Montreal at this point, and so they're looking forward to next year and seeing who they get at the draft this year. I don't see any reason not to have it that way, right? Montreal, there shouldn't be any panic in Montreal. I don't see any reason. Florida. Florida's a tough one in that they're still below the playoff line, but they've been playing well lately, and I think they've played well enough lately that if you're a Florida fan, you might be a little bit optimistic about their odds after the All-Star break. They've started to look like Florida again. They've started to become that team that's really dangerous late in the third period. They've started to become that team once again that you can't count them out, and that's really been Florida's MO for a long time. So it is easy to get focused on the fact they're still below the playoff line, and they are, but they're not that far off. So even if Buffalo doesn't steal a spot from Washington or Pittsburgh, it's possible Florida does. The East, far more competitive this year than it was last year, and it makes for more interesting hockey. By this time last year, games in the East, it was just for positioning in the top 8. The bottom 8 were all done. Detroit, I kind of want to put them over here at this point. I kind of do because of where they are in the standings, but they're not far enough out for me to put them over here. And yet, I don't know that I want to put them above the line either. So I might put them above Washington and Pittsburgh, and I'll explain why. There's no reason to panic if you're Detroit. Not really. This is a good young team, but I don't see them as being optimistic and happy either, because they're still below the playoff line and they've still lost some games they'd rather that they won, which is usually all of them. But yeah, for Detroit, so I'm going to leave them a little bit below the line. I don't think they're into better luck next year territory, and I don't think they're into we're okay with another top draft pick. Although we've seen what those top draft picks become under Steve Yzerman, and they usually become pretty darn good players. So that's where I'm going to have Detroit. For Buffalo, Sabres fans have to feel great going into the break, and it has to be weird. It has to be weird looking at a panic index in late January, going into February, and you've got New Jersey and Buffalo that high up. But Buffalo's playing really, really well. They're again, that game against Winnipeg was the one that really was impressive to me. And so we'll see if they can keep that up coming out of the All-Star break. But yeah, they've been playing really, really well lately. And then we get to Boston. Boston's lost 3 in a row. They have 1 game left going into the All-Star break against Toronto. But I don't think that's going to dampen any spirits in Boston. I think Bruins fans are still pretty happy, pretty excited about things. And I think if I take a team that's first overall in the NHL by almost 10 points, and I don't have them at the top of this board, there's a problem. There really isn't any reason to panic if you're Boston at all. And this is a team that's going to be interesting to watch in the playoffs. Because when you haven't played games of severe importance and you haven't been tested, you haven't had to worry about your place in the standings, it can be hard to get up for those games in the first round of the playoffs against a team that has been fighting for their lives. That's part of the reason or it's part of how Columbus ends up knocking out Tampa. Columbus, this is 2019, of course. Columbus battling and fighting to get into the playoffs, and Tampa Bay was home and cold for a long time. And I think it was hard for them to match the intensity of Columbus. Columbus just bringing into the playoffs the intensity they've been playing with all year. So, yeah. Then next up is, as we get to, that's the end of the Eastern Conference. So for the Eastern Conference, you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 above the line. 2 of them are actually below the playoff line right now. So there you go. Now we'll go to the West. Winnipeg, I'm going to put them a little bit above the line. I'm going to put them equal with Florida. But there's definitely some reason for concern right now. They've lost 5 out of 7 coming into this one tonight against the St. Louis Blues. The Blues have lost some games as well. The Blues not having the kind of season they'd hoped. And so for Winnipeg, I don't think they're in panic territory. But if this continues much longer, they're going to be in it. The Winnipeg Jets should be first in this division. Dallas has left the door wide open. Just Winnipeg hasn't been able to win enough to take the division. So for Winnipeg, just above the playoff line, and then we get to St. Louis. St. Louis, I think there's panic in St. Louis. I do. I don't think that there's the, well, we're out of this kind of state of mind of, well, we can look forward to, we're going to draft. Even though they're seen as sellers at the deadline, I think there is some panic with the St. Louis Blues. And again, whether you look at the goaltending as being the issue or you look at the defense as being the issue, there's a huge issue right now when it comes to the St. Louis Blues. Nashville. Nashville fans, I think, are likely pretty happy with the way things are going. I'll put them here. I could put them a little bit higher, but I'm going to put them just above the line just because. But for Nashville, it's been a good run lately. Because they've been below the playoff line as long as they have, I think people kind of take them for granted. And that could bite them. If Nashville comes in and gets a wild card spot, they could be a tough out in the first round. With UC Saros, if he plays the way he has for the last month, I don't think they lose in the first round. I think, and again, that's if he can keep that up. I think that Nashville could at least get a win in that first round and create some chaos in the West, which does happen. Minnesota's a tough one. They're right now they're fighting for that third playoff spot with Colorado, but Nashville's right there. I'm going to put them right with Detroit here for a different reason than Detroit. I don't think that, everything's all happy and sunshiny right now with Minnesota fans, but I don't think there's a need for a panic right now either. Not full-blown one anyways. We'll see how things go coming out of the All-Star break for them. I keep wanting to say deadline. I apologize if I'm saying deadline here because I know I sometimes will say one instead of the other. But coming out of the All-Star break, we'll see whether or not Minnesota still has what they need in order to really excel. Then you get to Dallas. And for me with Dallas, I'm going to put them on their own row. I'm going to have them above Florida and Winnipeg because they're still getting points. Dallas fans will say, hey, we're still getting points. Yeah, but they're losing a lot in overtime. And there's that killer instinct you're looking for from Dallas that I haven't seen lately. The ability to close out games is so important. And teams that struggle to close out games, if that continues into the playoffs, you're probably not going to last that long in the playoffs. And they're very hot and cold sometimes within the game itself. So for Dallas, I'm going to have them above the line. They're first in the division. I can't have them below the line, but I'm not going to put them up there either. Colorado, I think Avs fans are pretty optimistic right now. I'm going to put them just no, I'll put them right where Dallas is. That works. It works for me. Because I don't think they're in that category right now. I would put them as a little more optimistic than Jets fans. A little less panicked, a little happier. Colorado's playing well, and they're going to get healthy. So this is going to be an interesting time. Once they get healthy, does that negatively impact the lineup? And it can. Nathan McKinnon came back, and it seemed to throw things off a bit and they went into arguably their worst stretch of the year, which now they've pulled out of and had the best stretch of the year. So once other guys like Landeskog come back, what happens, right? So for Colorado, they definitely look like a team that could very well defend that Stanley Cup. And about 2-3 weeks ago, it didn't look like that was going to happen, but things can turn around. Chicago's right here. Chicago's right here with Columbus and Montreal. They've been there for a long time. The players on the ice, of course, not of the mind of being all cool with the idea of losing, so they go out there and win as much as they can. But Chicago's far enough out of it that I think we can say, yeah, they're not going to make it. And Arizona, it's the same thing. Arizona, not a playoff team. They're going to be right here, hanging out with the dude and waiting for the draft. That's where we're at right now. For Arizona, their home record has taken a bit of a beating over the last few weeks, but their team in general has just it's had its struggles. But again, Andre Tourigny behind the bench, they're going to win some games they probably shouldn't. Do not sleep on them going into a game, or they could very well beat your team. That's been the reality with Arizona for I would say the last 2 years now, where if a team doesn't really bring its work ethic and overlooks the Coyotes can beat them. Vancouver, for Vancouver, this is a tough one. I'm going to put it right here. So I don't think the panic is as panicked as the panic was, because the Boudreau saga is done, right? So while it still leaves a bad taste in the mouth of most Canuck fans, yours truly included, the reality is I don't think the panic is as panicked as it was. There are some who are not happy about, Kuzmenko signing, you got to just tear it down and throw everybody away, which is a bold strategy. But there are those as well that are saying, hey, we should tank. The thing is, they're not tanking. The team is actively not tanking. So I'm going to put them still in that row where the panic would be, but kind of halfway in between panicked and ready for the draft, because it depends on which fan you ask. Because there's still that panic of, why are they still winning games? Why? And the reality is that their schedule is not that tough from here. Vancouver will win their share of games. There's going to be a mirage of this team doing better, and that can be tough, because then a GM can go out and say, see, we're not that far off. We only missed the playoffs by 8 points. We're not that far off. We think we can make a couple of small tweaks and fix it. And Canuck fans, I don't think, are going to take that. Vegas is definitely in panic mode at this point. Vegas has had a tough time of it over the last few weeks. The injuries have mounted and continued to mount. And so Vegas has now lost their position as easily the best team in the Pacific Division. They were, 8 points ahead at one point? And now they're not. That cushion is gone. They don't look like the best team in that division. And there's some real doubt starting to creep in about, can they stay in the top three? Can they miss the playoffs 2 years in a row in a very similar fashion where injuries just take them out? How many prime years of these guys can you lose before the team starts to regress in general? So for Vegas, there's very good reason for panic in Las Vegas. San Jose. San Jose's over here as well. There's no panic in San Jose, I don't think. The only panic you might have is some of the contracts that are on that team and the amount of money and the amount of term, but that's just there anyways. There's no reason for that to panic people right now. So yeah, San Jose, while they're winning their share of games as well, recently at least, they're still in the waiting for next year. Seattle's got to be pretty darn happy right now. Seattle Kraken, arguably the best team in the Pacific. The one thing that I do worry about with Seattle is the goaltending. If they're in a playoff series, would Grubauer give them the goaltending they need to win in the first round? If it ends up being Drieger, does it end up being Jones? What happens? We'll see. But yeah, Seattle, I don't see any reason not to have them in the top row. I think it'd be crazy for me not to have them in the top row. The LA Kings. The Kings are an interesting one in that the goaltending is an issue in LA, right? Copley can have good games. He's had some really brutal ones as well. Quick, same thing. Peterson's in the minors, but still they're in the mix for first place in the division. So I'm going to put them right here with Dallas and Colorado. I don't see a reason to have them below the line right now, because they've won enough games lately that they're very likely to end up being top three in that division. But I don't know that I have a lot of faith in the goaltending at this point. And it may sound like beating a dead horse, but this is where we're at with the LA Kings, is that question of goaltending is going to linger. And this is why at the deadline I expect any available goaltender to be linked to the Kings. any of them. That's my expectation. Then we get to Edmonton. So for the Oilers, they're playing well right now. They are, they won what, 6 out of 7. I don't see any reason not to have the Oilers. I would say here, and I'm going to say here because there's still going to be your detractors for Jack Campbell, detractors for this team in general, and some concerns, just some general concerns around the Edmonton Oilers. So I'll have them at that level for now. We're almost done though, and you see a lot of teams I have above the line. I must be feeling really charitable today. And then you get to Calgary. Calgary, I'm going to put them slightly above the line. The Flames, they've had some really good stretches, some really rough ones as well. I'm not going to put them on the panic side because I don't think they're there yet. They're still favored to make the playoffs, as mentioned in the video I did today on them at the All-Star break. But I do have I personally have some concerns when it comes to Calgary going forward. But at this point, it does look like the Flames should make the playoffs, and then once you make the playoffs, who knows? And maybe they'd be better off as an underdog. Maybe they would be better starting on the road as the underdog. Maybe they have a better time of it. And then you get to Anaheim. So it ends kind of anticlimactically with Anaheim, who are right down here next to the dude. There's no reason to panic if you're a Ducks fan right now. I don't think there is any panic. I want to say, too, that, of course, there's a whole Zegers thing that's out there. I haven't reported on it because we don't really know what was said there, but Zegers is a guy that hasn't made a ton of friends on other teams around the National Hockey League, but Ducks fans seem to like him just fine, and he does score a lot of highlight reel goals. So I think the Ducks are well and set for the future. So let's see, how many Western teams do we have above the line? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Really? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. 8 and 8. There you go. Totally, I don't plan this. This is all off the cuff. 16 above the line, 16 below. There you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. This isn't meant to be scientific. This isn't meant to be anything more than just kind of a fun thing that I come up with one day, and now it has become a total thing on the channel. So let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. And hey, thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.